Hello, I'm Mark Sudduth, and welcome to the first season of the Hurricane Highway. I'm very excited to introduce this amazing project that was funded entirely from support through our patrons on Patreon. The Hurricane Highway is going to take a look back at the 2019 hurricane season, but we're going to do so in a slightly different perspective. We're going to hear from people who have helped to influence my career, as well as meet the people that we have run into over the many hundreds of thousands of miles while we have journeyed down that Hurricane Highway. You know, this is definitely representative of the power of crowdfunding. I've always wanted to put together a project like this, a television type series, and I think I've done a good job, and I'm excited to bring it to you. An exhilarating music score combined with unique cinematography and never before seen hurricane footage makes this my most ambitious project yet. I hope you'll enjoy our journey together down the Hurricane Highway. For more than 20 years, I have driven hundreds of thousands of miles in the pursuit of my passion. But what is it that draws me in? I can't explain it, no matter how hard I try. Maybe it's the raw beauty combined with the fact that all of this is so much bigger than any of us. Part of it is definitely the journey. And part of it is in an effort to satisfy my curiosity. That journey on the Hurricane Highway is full of stories, adventures, and discovery. Sometimes it leads us to the stuff of dreams. I grew up along the coast of North Carolina, and the Outer Banks was basically my playground as a child. My parents took me out there, my brother and myself, and we would enjoy places like Rodanthe and Cape Hatteras, Ocracoke Island, the Crystal Coast, Morehead City, Atlantic Beach. All of that was part of my childhood, where I learned a lot about the region and the weather that affected the region, the history of the region, and that included hurricanes.
As we vacationed on the Outer Banks a number of different times in the early years with Mark, he would hear us talking about the graveyard of the Atlantic and all the storms that had happened there and all the ships that had wrecked because of those storms.
When you're a kid, you know, that term graveyard really resonates with you, and I wanted to learn more. So I read what I could about the ships that were lost along the shoals of North Carolina's coast, the great storms that would come by and wreak havoc on early settlement times, All of that was very fascinating and very captivating to me as a young child. In grade school, I was already quite interested in science, but it was weather, especially the stories of legendary hurricanes, that kept me up at night. When we would go to the North Carolina Aquarium out at Pine Knoll Shores near Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, and they would show this film every August, and it was literally like a 16mm film on a film projector, like we would have in grade school. And it was a documentary made by the Department of Commerce or somebody like that in the wake of Hurricane Camille in 1969. And the name of the documentary was A Lady Called Camille. Seeing that film was really, really fascinating because it was sort of an old civil defense style film. The music was kind of cheesy. Just the visuals of it.
Crew shelter to pick up an expected mother. Take her to the hospital.
By 8 o'clock, power lines are falling, starting fires, and winds are whipping them out of control.
Images of the gravestones where the graveyard was flooded.
Everything is flooded out. Even the graveyards are 6 feet under.
And so Camille, as a child, was the benchmark hurricane that I was most fascinated with. It wasn't just terrestrial weather that piqued my interest. I was also quite fascinated with astronomy and spent many nights outside looking up at the night sky in amazement.
One of my fondest memories of Mark as a child, though, was laying out in our backyard in very cold weather in a lawn chair wrapped up in blankets watching the meteor shower.
He liked everything going on in the sky, so not just hurricanes and weather, but astronomical events. We photographed Comet Hale-Bopp across town with various interesting foreground objects.
Clearly I was into science. The question was, would I be an astronomer? Perhaps a geologist who would study volcanoes and help to predict earthquakes someday. Maybe I'd be a doctor, though I never was much for seeing the sight of blood. There was just something about the weather that kept calling my name. To this day, I can't explain it. Then, in 1982, something happened that would change my life forever.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Weather Channel, the non-ending weather telethon. I'm Bruce Edwards, glad to be with you this evening. And I'm Andre Bernier, glad you can join us from wherever you're viewing across the country. Hello, everybody.
Having access to 24 hours of these walking, talking encyclopedias known as the Weather Channel on-camera meteorologists, that was huge. In 1984, I was in 8th grade, and my science teacher was tracking a hurricane in September by the name of Diana, Hurricane Diana. And it was coming up along the coast, off of Florida towards the Carolina coast, and it looked like it could be a real problem. He was listening to the forecast on the NOAA weather radio right there in the classroom, plotting it on the hurricane tracking chart in the classroom, and so there was this science element, using it as a teaching tool, but there was also the fact that he was a father and a homeowner, and he knew that what was coming, potentially, for the New Bern area was not good. And I remember him saying that one time. One of the advisories came out, and he was listening to everything, and he plotted everything out, and he said, "That's not good." The one-time Category 4 hurricane stalled and made an eventual loop just off of Wilmington, causing it to weaken considerably. Of course, as a teenager, I didn't fully grasp the concept that hurricanes can cause major damage and take lives. I just knew that I was deeply fascinated by their seemingly mysterious nature. I mean, come on, we give them names. They're a part of American history.
We look at great disasters, whether it be a hurricane disaster or the Hindenburg or anything, and we're fascinated by the photographs, by the stories, by the surprising nature of it. being caught off guard. I think about the Galveston Hurricane 1900 and how tens of thousands of people really had no idea that their town was getting ready to be hit by this wall of water. So it's the fear of the unknown, the understanding that hurricanes are bad, but what does that mean? What are the impacts? Is it the wind? Is it the storm surge? Is it the rain? And of course, the answer is every storm is different.
A powerful Cape Verde hurricane came out of the deep tropics. It was going to turn that corner and come up the coast and again threaten eastern North Carolina. I was a year older, a year wiser, knew a little bit more about hurricanes, and I remember there was some gathering of my friends, my peers, and I wanted it on the Weather Channel or maybe the local station if the news was coming up. And I remember they had that crawl at the bottom that would talk about Craven County, Carteret County, New Bern, Morehead City, Atlantic Beach, the area that I lived in, and the threat that was coming, hurricane conditions, massive power outages, evacuations, all of these things were right there in front of me 24 hours a day. Gloria went on to make landfall across the North Carolina Outer Banks and then again in Long Island. I missed out on seeing any dramatic effects despite days of tracking it and being ready for what many referred to as the storm of the century. It would be 4 years before another hurricane would head my way. Watching Hugo's evolution as it made landfall around midnight, September 21st into the 22nd, 1989, I remember Dennis Smith of the Weather Channel covering it in Charleston and being out in the eye, and different reporters on CNN and the Weather Channel reporting on the various effects and impacts. Of course, it was at night, so you really couldn't see very much. I really wanted somebody to be able to tell me what the wind speeds were, if they were reporting in one of the rain bands or whatever, and it was windy behind them, and you could see that, how fast was the wind blowing, how low was the pressure, and very rarely did you ever see anybody with that kind of information. Maybe they would estimate it or something, but there was nobody with an anemometer. Nobody had a vehicle-mounted anemometer, certainly not back in the late 80s, and I just remember thinking that could be me. If that was me, that's what I would do. Of course, that's exactly what I ended up doing, but the journey along the Hurricane Highway was not clear at this point in time. In fact, when I started college, I wasn't sure of what my career would be. What a lot of people don't know is when I went to college, I actually went as a music major to start at UNC Wilmington, and I thought, okay, I'm going to become, a musician. I will sing and compose music. Somebody that could be a singer-songwriter. That's what I wanted to be as a teenager. And who doesn't, right? You pick up the guitar the first time and you think, hey, I'm going to be the next, Led Zeppelin or whoever. In the spring of 1993, after coming to the realization that I would not be the next Billy Joel or Elton John, I changed majors. I decided to switch to geography and focus on hurricanes as part of my core studies. I excelled and graduated in 1995 ready to change the world. Well, at least the world of hurricanes. I set out immediately to blaze my own trail, do my own thing in the world of hurricanes, even though I didn't know exactly what it was going to be yet.
Mark had identified a void in research of hurricanes, and that is there was really no measurable instruments or technology where hurricanes came ashore. You would see an area before landfall, after landfall. And unless the National Weather Service or some local weather station had equipment there right at ground zero, you had no idea what was happening.
So, the funny thing is that despite the fact that he was born and raised in North Carolina, he'd never actually been in a hurricane or a landfalling hurricane anyway in his life, at least at the time I'd met him, was still waiting for that moment when it was going to happen.
July 1996, I finally got my chance to see what a direct impact from a hurricane was all about, and that hurricane was Bertha.
Can I have your attention, please? This is the Wrightsville Beach Police Department. The town of Wrightsville Beach has ordered evacuation of the town effective as of 11 a.m. this morning.
and I thought, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna get some wind measurements and pressure readings, even if it's at the edge of everything, so to speak. So I drove my Nissan Sentra that I had out to Wrightsville Beach. Of course, the beach was closed, so I got up to the Waterway Lodge out there and parked in the parking lot. That's where all the media was. And I walked over to the drawbridge, and I took my handheld weather computer, Davis weather monitor, and a little anemometer that I had mounted on a pipe, so I could hold it up above my head. And I did that. I walked out to the bridge and I got some wind readings as one of the rain bands came over. And all these reporters came out taking pictures of me, taking video, whatever. And one of them stopped to ask me what I was doing. They said, "Are you a storm chaser?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not a professional storm chaser. I'm just kind of out here. I want to know what the wind is." And one of those interviews came with a picture from the Winston-Salem Journal, and they published that the next day. And that picture is the first picture ever taken of me doing what I do in hurricanes. Fran looked like it was going to make a direct hit in the Carolinas, and I was ready. My wife, we were married on August 16th, so Fran coming in early September made landfall on the 5th. My wife went to work as a nurse up in the emergency room in Pender County at Pender Memorial Hospital, and I was on my own at the house. It was me, our little dog, and my weather station. It was on the side of the house, and Fran made a direct hit right on southeast North Carolina. The eye went right over my house there in the Leland area just west of Wilmington.
So the eye will be coming onshore over New Hanover and Pender counties, it would appear.
As the core of Fran was approaching, you could really tell because it was getting loud, very loud outside. Tree branches were breaking. I had a Sony Hi8 video camera and a tripod and a fully charged battery. I simply took the Hi8 camera, put it on the tripod, flipped the Nissan Sentra that I owned and backed it in. I say flipped it, I turned it around. I backed it into the carport, aimed the headlights out into the elements, set the camera next to it in the carport, and just let it roll. So the eye moves over. Hurricane Fran moves right over my house. It's as calm as this room is here. And it was amazing. It was warm. You could hear water dripping off the trees. There was not a breath of wind.
It's just as calm as it could be. This is the eye of Hurricane Fran.
And then in the days after Fran, my wife and I drove around as best we could, documenting things all the way up into the Porter's Neck area of southeast North Carolina. Tree damage was exceptional. Boats washed up on shore on the intracoastal side of Wrightsville Beach. Very fascinating to see, fueling again my interest in hurricanes even more. As it turned out, Bertha and Fran were the first of 5 hurricanes that would directly impact southeast North Carolina from 1996 through 1999. Hurricane Bonnie was the next in late August 1998. I would have help this time, another hurricane enthusiast that I'd met online during the early days of the internet.
This was the late 90s, so we weren't texting or Facebooking or anything. I think it was a couple of message boards about weather, and one thing led to another, and email exchange took place, and next thing I knew, I was en route to Wilmington to meet up with Mark and chase our first hurricane. My first memories are of thunderstorms. Having grown up in Charlotte, my first sort of real interaction with a hurricane was Hurricane Hugo that just devastated the Piedmont of the Carolinas. And from the minute I got my driver's license, I was chasing some sort of weather, whether it was a thunderstorm or a snowstorm, and eventually the hurricanes came calling in the late 90s, and I was like, well, here's my chance. Somebody who kind of knows their way around. So I'll meet up with Mark and start chasing some hurricanes.
Jamie and I worked well together and thoroughly documented the impacts from Bonnie. It was my third hurricane intercept in 3 years, and I didn't even have to leave the state. But we weren't done yet, not by a long shot. So 1999 comes along, and I've got my website now. It was actually called HurricaneTrack.com back then, but I had bought the domain HurricaneTrack.com as well. And I was doing what we now know as blogging. I was just talking about the tropics on a daily basis. 1999 was also the year that I purchased and utilized a dedicated vehicle for intercepting hurricanes. The Isuzu Rodeo was just the right fit for my early years and served its purpose well. On August 24th, Dennis was named, and it looked like it might come close to the Carolinas. I got an email from a producer from CNN. Linda Roth was her name. She was a producer for Jeff Flock. Jeff was kind of like CNN's Jim Cantori. And his producer, Linda, found my website, Hurricane99.com, and read about my intentions of also covering Dennis from sort of a chaser perspective. You know, we don't really chase hurricanes, we intercept them, but nevertheless, that was what I was going to do, and CNN wanted to cover that. So I met up with Jeff and his crew down in Charleston, and we started from there.
We are chasing a hurricane.
We'll get ahead of it, and we'll be on the north side of it right now.
Meet Mark Sudduth. He runs the Wilmington, North Carolina-based Hurricane Intercept Research Team.
Feel the wind?
His goal, get a piece of Dennis and enough information that can help the vulnerable Carolina coast better prepare in the future.
And there I was with Jeff Flock, national television coverage.
We are going to be spending the next 24 hours or so with the Hurricane Intercept Research Team. This is Mark Sudduth.
And probably the first time on live TV that somebody would have vehicle-mounted anemometer readings to show the world.
This is a mounted anemometer that goes up to 175 miles an hour. If need be. And if we get inside, maybe it's a little quieter.
On the vehicle right now, the sustained wind is 43 miles an hour. We can look at the gust. Our gust was 53 miles an hour.
And we were able to show that on live television. I thought that was really, really neat. Dennis moved parallel to the North Carolina coast and then sat out over the Gulf Stream for a few days, sending battering waves to the Outer Banks. Then, on September 4th, Dennis, now a strong tropical storm, made landfall near Cape Lookout.
So then Mark talked me into going to observe what used to be Hurricane Dennis and what was now Tropical Storm Dennis.
You know, if this water's coming in, it's going to get deeper.
Right. So we might not ought to go too far.
And the thing that made me the most nervous was seeing the water just about to the edge of the road. And for as far as I could see, there was nothing but a plain out there. So that water coming in could have covered up the road immediately. And I kept pushing Mark to turn around so that we could go to higher ground.
990.2 millimeters, point one.
In the meantime, we made a lot of interesting observations and got some data.
Look at this. 67 miles an hour. That's incredible.
Just like 11 days after Dennis comes Hurricane Floyd.
Yeah, so Mark came to me and he says, hey, do you want to go intercept a hurricane? And I thought at the time, well, this sounds pretty awesome. That was quite an adventure. Looking back now, we were really in harm's way with such a lightweight vehicle at the time. We knew we needed to go to the police chief or the fire station, get their approval, talk to them. It was a learning curve. This was fairly new. Not a lot of folks were doing it, so we really had to spend a lot of time educating them and showing them what we wanted to do. And instinctively, they would want to come over to the rodeo and look at all of our equipment. And Mark would walk them through everything with all the equipment measured, what it showed on the computer screen, what we were hoping to capture, the data, and how we were going to use it and share it.
I was a little apprehensive. I wanted to be right where the action was, but having just gone through a really harrowing drive just to get down to the coast, and then it's like, all right, well now we're going to go out on the beach, and we could, legally be on the beach at that time, but knowing that we were going to be right there at ground zero was definitely a little bit concerning.
We didn't have a way to send pictures. I mean, I really wanted wireless internet back then, but it just wasn't there yet, not like we have now. And also being able to feed pressure readings, and I don't think we did much wind readings down there. We were in between buildings, and I knew that wasn't going to be accurate. And the eye comes right over. Jamie and I sat in the eye. I filmed the high water marks, all the stuff floating by, and it was dead calm once again. And we got that nice low pressure reading in the eye of Hurricane Floyd. Back in the day, if you wanted to get readings like that, that's how you had to do it. You had to punch that core, you had to sit in the core, you had to take those risks, and it paid off. I look back and I think that was probably unwise to sit in a small SUV in the eye of a hurricane on Wrightsville Beach, but who else is going to do that? Somebody's got to do it. Might as well have been us, myself and Jamie. And we would learn from that. We would go on to, he went to be a chief meteorologist at a TV station, safe inside doing what he does, and I eventually came up, of course, with the remote camera idea to move away from documenting hurricanes in person. But in those early days, that's how you had to do it.
Category 2 hurricane out here. Did the western eye come ashore?
Yes, it did. It came right across, right down over top of us, right there.
There is the Hurricane Landfall Project truck. It's all set up, strapped down. We're going to turn all the switches on in just a little while. Standing outside of the Chevy Tahoe, we are getting into the eye wall of Hurricane Gene right now. Or came in on shore here along the southeast coast of Florida.
These little bullet cams right here that we will use to record that surge. Over the course of the next 20 years, I'd work with many great people to advance the science of understanding hurricanes. My ideas slowly took shape and eventually gave rise to what we have today.
It's about 9 o'clock now, Central Time, which means that if we set them up and turn them on right now, they'd run until about noon tomorrow. Got it?
With the dawn of the age of wireless internet and quantum leaps in technology, the project evolved and captured the impacts of hurricanes like never before.
This thunderstorm activity appeared to consolidate around that eye.
That is storm surge from the Atlantic Ocean, the overwash coming in. I turned my passion and interest in hurricanes into a career that has spanned for more than 2 decades. My journeys have led me into the new era of legendary hurricanes, immersing us within the impacts, yielding stunning video and useful data. And as every journey does, it all began with the first miles.